Hello, this is Will Faerber from Art to Ride, and today we're looking at a first submission of the horse Tia by our friend Chelsea. Chelsea submitted her first video quite a while back, and it was certainly very different than what we're seeing here. This horse has become much more active, much more swinging over its back. She's doing a much better job lunging it. Everything here is going really, really well, and by the end of this tape, she's really getting this horse to stretch into a really good contact in the trot, which is what we're looking for. So it's not a matter of where we start, it's where we end up. So on the lunge work here, he started out a little bit quick, but we can see he's already beginning to stretch into the contact and getting longer and looser. And always watch the back end of the horse as we're lunging these horses. Watch how as the neck stretches down and forward and we see the underside of the neck become soft and relaxed. Notice how much rounder the action in the hock becomes, like right there. And the horse starts swinging underneath itself and we can see the back loosen up. Always remembering when we talk about bend, a horse always has to be longitudinally bent before it can bend on the circle. For instance, when you saw this horse in the very beginning, he was very much counterflexing to the outside, and we saw the underside of the neck was a little bit stiff. But as soon as the horse began to stretch into the contact, and that is lift its back up, and then we see that the horse can suddenly bend on the circle. So once again, the trick to getting horses to bend is simply to get them to lift their backs. Once they can lift their backs, they simply can bend. It no longer becomes a struggle. So this is a huge improvement over what we've seen in the past with this horse. Really developing nicely. I see how the dip behind the saddle there has really gone away. This horse's neck has really lengthened out. And we can see the top line is clearly developing over what we saw in the first video. Getting into a good rhythm in the stretch. And notice as the horse stretches down how it just becomes very relaxed, the ears become very floppy, the eyes become very relaxed. We just read a recent study here that showed that as well as all the other physical good stuff that happens when we get our horses to stretch over their backs, they're proving now that actually the horses actually release endorphins when they stretch correctly, which helps them to relax, of course, and get in that place, like a runner who gets in that place where they get in a runner's high, where they can just keep going and they feel that total relaxation. So good lunging work there starting out. Everything I want to see. The horse was beginning to settle in. I'm sure it got better as you went on there. And now getting to the work in hand. This is actually looking quite good as well. So watch as the horse, the point of the work in hand is to get the horse not just to stretch, but how we get the stretch is by getting the horse to step underneath the center of its body with the inside hind leg, and that pushes the back up. And as the back pushes up, the horse will naturally want to stretch forward. So the two kind of come at the same time. So get the idea, and I see some people are a little bit confused about that. It's not just teaching the horse to stretch its neck down. Once again, the horse stretches its neck down when we position the back in the right place by getting the horse to step under. Once again, as you see in the work in hand here, as the horse steps underneath the body, when it gets in the right place, it pushes the back up, and that tends to bring the horse into the stretch, as opposed to just trying to separate the stretch of the neck from what's happening in the rest of the body, which I see some people trying to do with the idea of clicker training and some of these things, which are not a bad idea, but I'm just pointing out the fact that the real stretch comes from the back lifting up, and that's what happens. That's why we do the lateral work, is we get the horse to step underneath the body. The hind leg on the inside steps under, and as it pushes off the ground, it tends to push the back up, and then the back is pushed up. That will tend to make the horse want to stretch into the contact. So like everything else in real classical riding, it must come from behind forward and through the body of the horse, as opposed to just, for instance, standing in front of a horse with a piece of sugar and getting them to stretch down, which is not a terrible thing to do either. In fact, a good thing to do when you have horses that have forgotten how to move correctly, and which very many of your horses are like that in the sense that they've been upside down for many, many years. Some have been like that for so long they've literally forgotten how to use the correct set of muscles. That's all really good work, how he's stretching down into that. You've really developed a good eye for this and a good feel. So very well done. She's going to try a little piaffe work here. And always remember that the prerequisite for starting piaffe work is that the horse is going light in the reins and has learned to stretch into the contact. And the piaffe should be something that takes quite a while to develop. In the beginning with most horses, all we're doing, like you see her doing here, is just bringing the horse to the wall and getting it used to the idea that we're going to touch it with the whip, that the whip is nothing to fear, It's just a little indication. The horse activates from your touch, so that's a pretty good one to go back a little bit, but you did just the right thing by just asking it to step up. Once again, just by touching it on the side where your leg would go. And that's just the right thing to do. Bring the horse back into that position and let it calm down again if it's gotten a little excited about that. So at first we just have to get the idea that when you touch it, the horse isn't going to charge off, which is of course why this doesn't work if you've been riding your horse by holding it against your hands, because if you try to do this kind of work, it's just going to bolt right through your hands from the ground. So that's very normal. Sometimes they want to step up or they want to step back a little bit, and sometimes they'll kick out a little bit at the whip. As long as you're not asking too much, bring the horse forward again, just like that, and that's just what you'd want to do, and reward the horse again for just stepping forward. And that's very much the right approach there. Just let the horse relax again. And that's enough for today. So at least the horse was beginning to activate from the tap of the whip and wasn't getting excited, wasn't blowing up or rearing up or any of the things or trying to bolt through your hands. So that was a good beginning of piaffe. And you just want to take it slowly, just like that, as we get that horse used to the work. And pretty soon you'll give it a little tap on top and it'll start to move the diagonal pairs, and then you just reward it for that. So that was a good beginning of the piaffe work, and that's just what you wouldn't want to do it for longer than that, just a few moments there, just get the horse into the idea. And as I said, as long as the horse isn't charging away from you, you know that you can do this work. So getting started with the walk work here. Good leg yield to the rail, and notice once again how that leg yield brought the horse into the stretch, just like you did in the work in hand. That's the point of the lateral movements in this early stage, is just for that alone, getting the horse to step onto the middle of its body and push up so that you can ask it to stretch into the contact. And if that work has been done right, that will be the effect. So this horse is still a little unstable in that it doesn't just go right there and stretch and stay there for you, but you're doing a very good job of getting it to where you need it to be. And using the leg yield there once again, as we see a better stretch as the horse begins to come forward. So everything I'm seeing here is showing me a rider that's developing the way I want them to, in the sense that they're staying relaxed, they're working with what they have to work with, and they're not overworking the horse or demanding things that are impossible for the horse to do, which of course is what leads to so many horses being resistive in the beginning, is that people simply don't understand what it is they can ask a horse to do on a given day. So they ask it to do a lot of things, and usually they ask them to do that by pulling their neck back into their body, which of course makes the horse extremely uncomfortable in all the work that you do, and what leads to most of the difficulties that we see people having in dressage, the point where horses just get to the point where they just stop moving and refuse to move from the leg at all because they've been held back so much. So this is really good work. I really love how calm you're being through all of this, and just every time the horse comes up, you're just dealing with the problem again by putting the horse back in a little bit of a shoulder inner leg yield, which is what the purpose of these exercises is. And that's the thing to never forget. You know, we don't do a shoulder in just because we want to go sideways on a horse and we think it's a cool thing to do. We do it because that's how we begin to get control of the horse's body and posture. Now that walk is starting to look better. And once again, notice how every time the horse stretches that head and neck down, how much more it steps through behind and how much more active the hind end becomes. Because by stretching down and forward, the horse is able to lift its back a little bit, and that's what frees the horse's back end to be able to step under the back. So when a horse is collapsed in the middle in its back, it's literally impossible for it to step deeper under the body, because it literally is collapsing in the middle. It's like a bridge that's collapsing in the middle. The two ends end up going in the opposite direction. That's why we see so many horses today piaffing and passaging with their hips higher than their withers. They're kind of jumping up behind because the horses are hollow, so the stride cannot complete itself through the back. Really good leg yield there, and once again the result of that is a good stretch. So once we realize that horses really only develop once we get them over their backs, that has to be our main goal right from the very beginning. And once we get them to stretch over their backs, then they're comfortable in the aids. A lot of people have the idea about training horses that it's all about just making them encounter things. Like we see a lot of these Western people, and why they do nothing to control the frame of the horse, but they're bringing out tarps and they're making them walk on tarps and blowing things at them and all these kind of things, to try to get them used to things. But the point is, when we get horses to work over their backs, they relax and they become truly in the age, which is what enables us to ride them when they find something that they're scared of, or that sort of thing. In other words, they give themselves over into the aids because they trust it, which is very different than just trying to accustom horses to things, if that makes any sense. In other words, a horse that's really in the aids and has been trained correctly, you don't need to do any of that because they just, they start listening to the aids rather than just, oh, have I seen this item before? Have I walked over this tarp before? Once they're truly in the aids, then you can begin to confront them with all those kinds of things, and you don't have all this big problem that you have about it if you're trying to do it with a horse that's not really in the aids. And a horse that's not really over its back, not really working through the back, will never be truly relaxed in the aids. You can get a horse very dead and dull, but that's very different than a horse that's truly responsive to the aids. That is, when you put your leg on the back, lifts, and the horse pushes into the contact a little bit and lifts its back up. That's what brings your attention back on, brings the horse's attention back onto you. As I said, rather than just the idea that we're getting a horse used to things. But the problem is when we take that approach, there's always something that the horse is not going to be used to. And we're going to encounter that. I see so many people get injured on young horses because they think because they're calm walking around an indoor arena like this that they're trained. And then they take them outside, and the first time a truck goes by or a wild turkey jumps out of the bushes, they quickly realize that they really don't have any control at all because the horse isn't accustomed to those things. So that's very different than having a horse truly in the aids where the horse will listen to the aids no matter what's going on around it. Good work there, back into that stretch, and you handled that just exactly right. I like how you bring your hands up as the horse comes up with its head and neck, rather than just exactly what you want to do is just follow up. But you don't want to hold the horse's head up in the air, as the way I see some people doing, and then that tends to make the horse plunge down, but still with a hollow back. So you just follow up with your hand so the horse can't escape that light contact, and then you'd want to put the horse back into a bit of a lateral movement from a position like this is what you do, and then you get the horse back down in the stretch. So your stretches have come a long way with this horse. He just has a little ways to go to get really completely consistent. I'd like to see you within a short period of time, which won't be too long, with the way you're developing here, that you can come out and get on the horse and stretch it right away and get that place where you're ending up within the first 5 or 10 minutes of your ride. That's being our goal, and that's when we know we're ready to begin really bringing a horse in the other direction. That is, bringing them more up into a full working gait and then ultimately into collection. But there's no point in trying to bring them up until they're consistent in the stretch all the way down. Otherwise, you would just be interfering with what you're doing. So that's developing a really good walk there. So just think about just one thing at a time. The biggest problem with most people training horses, they can't decide what they want to do. And they do a little of this one day, a little of that the next day. And they never really have the foundation like real training is, where you come out and you do the same things every day and you build on that foundation little by little. So that's starting to be a good walk there. You're having moments when that is really good. And he comes up a little bit and you put him right back in the shoulder in. That's just what you should do, just like that. That's the tool that you have to get the horse's back up underneath you. Really good walk there as it starts to really stretch into the contact. But I love how patient you're being with all of this. It's always better to err on the side of taking a little more time, because you really can't ever force anything that's really worth having. When we force horses to do things, all they do is become stiff, and eventually they will let you down, because when we force horses to do things, they're always afraid of whatever it is that you're doing to them because they're being forced, so they feel like a slave. So they're never going to, happily work for you or defend you, so to speak, in the situation where things go wrong. Whereas a horse that's been trained correctly is not always looking for where the next blow is coming from, so they relax. But a horse that's been, if you pull against the horse's mouth all of the time, you are punishing the horse all the time. So how is the horse ever going to become really relaxed? Once again, some very quiet horses will become very dull, which people mistake for being relaxation, but it's not the same thing. A horse that's totally checked out. And even those kind of horses, what we often find with people is that, once they take them into a new environment, all of a sudden they wake up and they have a very different horse than they had at home, because all they were having at home was a horse that's very dulled out, but once again, not really in the age, just like we talked about before, the difference between just accustoming horses to things and actually putting horses in the age so that you can overcome the horse's natural fear of certain things because they listen and trust the aids. Good stretch there. So that walk work, I just want to see it become a little more consistent than it is so far, but you're doing just the right things. And if you continue on the path that you're on, it will not be long before that becomes totally consistent. So that would be the point at which you'd think about trying to bring this horse's pole up. Right now, you just want to get that right there is really good. That's about an optimal stride for that horse right there. And notice how much more beautiful the horse looks as it stretches down. We see the underside of that neck completely relax. And you're doing a great job of once again, following up with your hands and then using your legs by putting the horse a little more into a lateral movement to get the horse's back up and back into the stretch. That's exactly how it should work. Look how wonderfully relaxed this horse when he stretches down, how wonderfully relaxed he looks, and the ears get really floppy and the eyes become relaxed. Just like that. Really good trot work right there. We see on that circle, even though his pole was up a little bit, he still was keeping the same trot. So that tells me that it won't be long before you'll be able to bring this horse up into a more consistent working trot. Just like that, just doing just the right things. And I just love how patient you're being here. Just every time he comes up, you're correcting him, putting him back down again. So already we're seeing this horse beginning to develop self-carriage because you're not holding it up. So once we understand that once we get the horse to stretch over its back and stretch into the contact, it is in self-carriage because we're not holding it up any longer. So self-carriage begins the day that you can get a horse to stretch and lift its back. It's just self-carriage at the level that the horse can be in self-carriage, as opposed to some idea that they're going to be in some much higher level frame, which they will be, but if you have held a horse together by your hands, it's never going to develop self-carriage. It's because you're always holding it up with your hands and making the horse uncomfortable to boot, as well as punishing it. Just remember, if you're pulling against the mouth of the horse all the time, you are constantly punishing it. And watch as the horse's head comes up, how those hind legs begin to sort of fall out behind a little bit. We don't have that round circle in the hock. So this is a good one to watch as it goes down because you can so clearly see the difference in this horse once it starts to stretch like that. Now watch the back end, how it starts to swing back under the body again, like it's doing right there. So always remember on your circles, just like you're doing here, just a little bit of shoulder fore when you begin to lose that contact and lose the stretch, which is just what you're doing. You're doing this exactly right. So we want to see that trot just get a little more consistent and stay there. But you're well on your way to having that. But just know that you don't want to think about bringing the horse up, as I said before, that is up into a higher level frame until this trot just becomes a little more consistent. Or quite a bit more consistent in the sense that it becomes totally consistent and that you can just keep the horse there in the stretch. And once you get that, then it's a simple thing to just begin the process of bringing the pole up But once again, as high only as you can keep the horse over its back. With a beautiful swinging trot there as he starts to stretch a little deeper into it. Once you begin to open your eyes and you begin to watch the back ends of horses, it's just so telling to see whether they're swinging under or not. And you see how when they come up, how their stride shortens behind. You can see that even with this horse every time it comes up there. Watch as it goes down again, how we begin to see that rounder action in the hocks. Good little shoulder four there. Good use of that, and by virtue of that, you kept the horse a little rounder. Still coming up and down a little bit, but once again, not totally, even through that, the horse didn't totally drop its back. But once you get this trot consistently in the stretch, it's not going to be long before you'll be bringing this horse up in the contact. Because already when he comes up and down, a lot of the time he's staying in a pretty good position. That is, over his back. It's very normal that you know you're really on the right track when you can make those changes of diagonal and you don't have the horse go back and hollow on you again. Another good indication that you're ready to start, that is bringing the horse up a little higher. But the way you're going about this is all very good. You're never losing your patience. You're just bringing the horse back into that little bit of a shoulder four right there when you lost the roundness. Following up with your hands, which is a good thing, and as he starts to go down, you just release. That's the right thing to do there. But once again, you never want to hold the horse's head up. You just follow up so the horse can't change the contact. That is, it can't. When you put your hands down, as most beginners try to do, when they have the idea of getting the horse's head to stretch, what ends up happening, if the horse pulls its head up, it just bears, puts all its pressure and pulls upwards against your hands, which makes the horse even hollower. There, coming into a good stretch. So even though you can see right there, even though the horse got a little bit hollow, it still was staying pretty deep underneath the body, even when it did come up, compared to what it did in the earlier stages. There, I like how you're bringing that horse a little more shoulder four there. And there you begin to get a better stretch. Just like that. There, now that was really good, and that was handled just really, really well. Really good stretch there. Now notice the hocks again, how much rounder the action in the hocks is. So once we find that position, the head of the neck, that simply allows the back to lift, which every horse it's going to be a little bit different. And of course with horses that have been upside down for years and years and completely forgotten about how to move correctly, horses that are extremely sway back and this sort of thing, now those are horses we just have to get to stretch the head and neck down as best we can because they're not going to be able to lift their backs for some time. But by stretching the head and neck down and forward, that's once again how the body will correct itself over time. Why it's so important, for instance, for horses to eat with their head and necks down. You should never feed horses out of bins or out of hay nets up in the air like you're feeding a giraffe. Horses are intended to eat off the ground. That's how they are built. Their digestive system is set up to work that way. So when you feed horses out of hay bale necks and things like that, they stand with their necks up in the air and dropping their backs. That's why even in a stall it's so important to feed horses off the ground out of a rubber tub or something like this, and never in a feed bin that's up, at your waist level. You want the horse to eat from the ground. That's why it's so important that babies develop in big fields where they can move on grass and be constantly having their heads down, moving and eating. which is very different than raising horses as so many people do here in California in dirt lots where the horses just stand around a feed bin all day long and never move, and even then they're eating out of mangers and things like that, so their head and necks are never even in the right position then. So it's so important to the development of young horses that they get that start correctly, that they start developing their own bodies, which they will. Good shoulder 4 there. There, and into a really good stretch there. So everything I'm seeing here you do is really, really well done and just the right approach to it. And you're taking your time for your level of skills. As you develop your skills, you'll find that you'll get this a little quicker and more consistently. But the way you're going about it is exactly how you want to learn it. That is, you never want to try to force anything out of the horse. The only thing we ever insist upon with horses is simply that they yield their hindquarters away from us, which is the most basic part of training and how horses respond naturally to each other out in the field. So just by getting them, that's why the work in hand is so important, to get them to yield their hindquarters away from us. Beautiful trot right there. Now look how swinging and lovely that is. That's exactly what we're looking for. So you're ending in the right place, and it won't be long before you'll be able to come out and you'll get this work in the first 5 or 10 minutes. You'll get the horse this stretch. And it's that point when you'll begin to want to bring the horse up in the pole. But not until then. We still see a little bit of a dip behind the saddle there, but it's so much improved on this horse. Really well done, and that's getting to a beautiful place in the end of it. And you're just developing into a very nice, quiet rider. Your heels are down, toes are lifted. That's what I want to see, so you're not constantly legging the horse. And remember, every time we use our legs or the hand, whatever it is, it's always released again completely, so we never keep pressing in. That's a beautiful stretch. Now, you ended just right there, and look how the horse was able to come into that deep stretch in the walk after you did that. But yes, excuse my voice a little bit this morning. I'm a little hoarse, as they say. But that was a wonderful downward transition, and exactly how we want to look, that it didn't slam on the brakes, but stepped forward into the transition into walk. So where you got to was there, just a fantastic place. I love how everything you're developing here is just the right way to go about it. Your body is looking quite good. Your back is straight. You could maybe just lift that chest a little more and bring your shoulders back a little bit, but really they're in a good place. Now, I'm never seeing you overusing your legs. You're coming back, you use your legs and your hands, and then you simply relax them again as soon as the horse has responded. And if it doesn't respond, you still relax, and then you ask again, as opposed to kicking and then holding against the leg and trying to kick harder, which is what we see so many people doing. So between every time that you use your hands or your legs, you completely relax them again. So there's never any backwards pressure against the mouth of the horse. There's just a positive sense of contact, but it's never a backwards pressure. Sometimes we soften the horse a little bit on one side or the other by just giving and taking a little bit, but that's very different than bracing and holding. So coming back to a really good walk here at the end. So everything I'm seeing here is developing absolutely beautifully. Now I'm going to see this horse at the clinic here in a week or so, so I'm really looking forward to seeing this in Cleveland and seeing how much more improvement we can make from there. But you've really done a good job with this, and you're really on your way to understanding this work. You've done a really good job. Especially since you've been working on your own since I saw the last submission, which was quite a while ago. So great work. This is Will Faerber from Art to Ride. Keep up the good work, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks. But look how beautiful that horse's neck is looking. Look how big and swinging the stride is.